here we are, Nicky. Those brilliant 4 days have finally arrived. You are the most successful British trainer at the festival with 72 winners. Been, of course, to enhance that this year. You've got some good chances. Let's kick off with John Bon in the Arkle, a race that you've won 7 times before. How confident are you that John Bon can emulate his full brother Duvan in winning the top novice over 2 miles?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be confident because I think there's a lot of opposition in here. But he's in good form. He's done nothing wrong. He's had 3 runs over fences. He's won all 3. And he seems in good form. He had a good gallop last week. He schooled very nicely. And, you know, I think it'll be a tough race. You could see a real good pace, Al Fabiolo, that we beat a neck or something like that in the Grade 1 novice hurdle at Aintree last year. So over hurdles, there was probably very little between them. They were very impressive at the Willie Mullins Racing Festival in Dublin. You know, I think it's brewing up for a very interesting contest. To say, Dysart Dynamo would have been the horse I'd have been probably most frightened of, but he did get beaten by the other one. So, you know, we're taking on 2 there, and plenty more, I'm sure. But it's going to be very competitive and will be very fast. I don't think the pace would worry us. I think stamina is probably to our, you know, I think he stays very well.
So you'd be almost happier the faster the pace, the better, so that stamina really does sort of have to come into
Well,
play.
he's not a slow horse, but he does stay very well. So I think he's better on a galloping track.
We saw him win the Kingmaker at Warwick last time out, and I was there on course that day, and there were quite a few gasps when all of a sudden Harry Scouten sort of took the ball by the horns and tried to just get him beat, and he almost looked caught flat-footed for a stride or 2. What were your thoughts when you watched the race?
Well, horror, shock horror. I think everybody needed a bit of a wake-up call here because, you know, he'd only had 2 runs over fences. He hadn't seen another horse in either race. He jumped very, very well, but he'd been going around on his own. All of a sudden, something pounces on top of him. And it took him by surprise, as much as I think it took Aidan by surprise as well. And consequently, you know, he had to suddenly sort of pick himself up, dust himself down, and get on with it, which he did. And except in fairness, I think it probably was a good thing because he had a really good blow afterwards. So I think he'd probably been having life a bit too easy. You know, that definitely sharpened him up. He's had a racecourse gallop since. And Paddy, who rides him every day at home, every minute. I mean, really, he's the sort of horse I'd like Paddy to ride him down to the start and Aidan to get on him at the start. I don't think that's in the rules somehow.
But we said you won this race with some true greats, you know, Altior and more recently Shiskin. How far up the pecking order would you feel that John Bon is at this stage of his career compared to your previous winners of the Arkle?
I think he has, he's like them, he's got an enormous future. This is the first and next step. He was beaten fair and square in the Supreme by Constitution Hill last year, but that in itself appears not to have been a great disgrace. And he won a really good race at Aintree, so he's been beaten once. Everybody's got to get beaten one day, so let's hope that was it there.
Which brings us nicely on to Constitution Hill, who, of course, takes his chance in the Unibet Champion Hurdle. You've won it 8 times before. We saw him score this morning on his own over hurdles. He seemed to go through that nicely and sort of going through the motions. So how is he then in the lead-up to the biggest test of his career?
He was very good. He had a gallop at Kempton the other day. He'll do another bit of work tomorrow. And then I would like to think that's most of it done. Everything's gone well. As long as it's not quick ground, which he won't be, then I'm not worried what it comes up, to be honest with you. I think he handles everything. He's got to go and do it again. And everybody it's rather frightening when you get to the situation where they expect him to rather than hope he will. You know what I mean? We'll be the ones doing the sweating.
He's currently 3-1 on with Unibet to give you another Unibet Champion Hurdle. Is there any chink at all in his armour? Is there anything that you are just slightly concerned about in the way he races or the way he jumps or the ground? Or is it anything, just a tiny inkling that you think, that worries me a little bit?
Well, you've got to say no, because there isn't. He can race any way you like, as you saw in the Fighting Fifth. He can make the running. You can hold him up. He'd get as far as you want, but I mean, we know it's 2 miles, so that doesn't matter. If they go a good gallop, great. He has a gear. The great thing is he has the ability to race sort of under the radar, if you like. Under normal circumstances, and a lot of things can happen and be different. Under normal circumstances, the atmosphere doesn't get to him. He's not a fusser. He doesn't pull. As I say, you can ride him any way. Touch wood, he's jumped very well all the way through. You can't say he does do anything. He makes our lives very, very easy. But again, you've still got to be aware they're not machines. And you can't just keep rolling it out every time, at least you hope you can. But, we're well aware these are horses, that this is a living animal, and, all sorts of things can happen. I mean, the extraordinary thing about him is he's got to this exalted, well, he has an exalted rating, probably because he's deserved it, but he's risen to the sort of top of the popularity polls very, very quickly, in that he's only had 5 races in his life. So he's only the young kid on the blocks, really. And it's extraordinary to think he's done that in 2 seasons. He's had 5 runs. I wish he'd had more, but except there's nowhere else to go. It has been a meteoric rise to the top. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be at the top, but nobody can knock him for what he's done, because it has all been pretty spectacular every time.
Let's move on to the mares hurdle. Of course, you've got Maria's Rock currently engaged in that, but Epatton, who you said you will supplement, a previous winner of the Unibet Champion Hurdle, she's again done nothing wrong this season. She just bumped into Constitution Hill a couple of times, which wasn't great.
Well, no decision's been made which way she'll go yet. She could easily run in the Champion Hurdle. She's fully entitled to. She's won one, was second to Honeysuckle in the Champion Hurdle last year. It's a question of, does she take on Constitution Hill again, who's already beaten her twice this year? We found a nice grade 2 for her, and she won with absolutely beautifully. I mean, it was perfection. And I think that only goes to show what Constitution Hill was beating. She hadn't suddenly improved. She was just was back in her own class and company that without a Constitution Hill. Honeysuckle beat her a couple of lengths last year. It was close. She stayed 2.5 at Aintree when she won the Aintree Hurdle last year. So we're just going to see. We're going to see what is in the Champion and make sure that Constitution is 100%. I think, I talk to JP most days, and no firm decision has been made. We'll sit on the fence until we see that everybody else is there and what they're doing, and then we can throw our hat in the ring to whichever race we feel like on the day.
But you've been pleased with her in her preparation for whichever one she runs in? Everything's gone swimmingly?
Yeah, everything's gone great. I mean, her run the other day was great. She worked extremely well at Kempton last week. Didn't school her this week because, blimey, what can I teach her about jumping? And I agree, they're not out there to be taught about jumping. It's just to keep their eye in, really.
Let's just continue our sort of look at your potential runners on the first day. Arclight, she's in there off 118 in the Boodles. She may just scrape in at the bottom there. We saw her again score this morning. What are your thoughts on her?
Well, the only thing I was staggered actually. She's only had 3 runs. She won her first 2 very nicely, and then was second in a good listed race, actually getting beaten by a horse that she'd beaten first time out. I didn't think that was as good a run as the others. I know she got beaten. But she's had a bit of a break, and she's come back in very good form. And look, she was bought to have some fun. And the guys have had 3 great days. She won 2, then she's second in a listed race. She's got black type. We've had a lot of fun with her. We said, come on, you might as well go and have a run in the Boodles. Be fun. And a handicapper comes out and gives her 118. Well, normally I'm sort of complaining about what they get. Yeah. I couldn't believe it. I thought this was 125 plus. And so she's incredible. I think she's very well handicapped. But of course, the problem is she probably won't get in. So consequently, she is actually in at Sandown on Saturday. But we will get a look at the entries for the Boodles before we have to declare for Saturday. So we can. I'd love her to run in the Boodles, to be honest with you. I think she's in good form. She's had a break, one bit of work at a school, and away we go.
Mr. Coffey's in the National Hunt Chase and placed in the Kim Muir last year. He's currently 9-1 with Unibet to go a place better at the festival than 12 months ago. What were your thoughts on his run at Uttoxeter last time?
They had a full start and then a standing start, and he did a lot of standing still, and consequently started at the back instead of the front, which was a little boring, and then got caught very, very wide. I mean, there's nothing Derek could do. And if you're going round Uttoxeter wide of a big field, he did well to get to where he did, to be honest with you. He will stay. He's still in the Grand National. You know, I think he's been competitive. Having said that, I think this is a good race, the National Hunt Chase. Each year, it's becoming a much classier race. Of course, it's no longer, you know, it used to be for restricted novices, 4 miles, oh, it's too far for the good horses. Take 2 furlongs off, so what? It's opened it up to all sorts of winners, and good horses are now using it. He is a good horse, Mr. Coffey. He's just been second in rather, you know, but as you say, he's been second in a Kim Muir. He's been second in all sorts of good races. So he deserves to win one, and so to make up for lost time, it'd be nice if he could pull this one out of the bag. I think he's, long as the ground isn't too, it won't be too quick, but I mean, he does go on proper slow ground. I hope he'd be very competitive, yeah.
Would you ever consider perhaps putting some cheek pieces or...
Yes, we are thinking about that. I want to talk to Derek again, actually, but we might just try that.
Day 2, one of your quieter days at the festival, Nicky. Persian Time, a big price in the Ballymore with Unibet, 66-1. Would that be nice value, in your opinion?
Well, it would. I mean, he's only had 2 runs in his life, and he's done nothing wrong, actually. He definitely stays. He won the first time. He was second to what probably looked a very good horse at Ascot the last time. We're just scratching around to find a race to run him in, to be honest with you. I just want a nice 2.5 mile novice hurdle. And... you know, we've discussed it. We certainly haven't ruled it out, to be honest with you. We'll see. I mean, he's got to work again. He worked very well on Saturday. I mean, he's going to be a lovely horse. Might be a year too soon for him, to be honest with you, but, you know, he's well capable. Right,
the Coral Cup then, Nicky. You've got loads entered in it. We'll just spin through. You can let us know what your plans are. Obviously, Theatre Glory, she's in it at the moment at 10-1 shot, rated 145, but you may, as I said, supplement her for the mares. What way at this stage do you think you may just be angling towards?
Well, it sounds as if she's going for the mares. I think she'd have a terrific chance in the Coral, I must admit.
Okay. No Ordinary Joe, he's in a
Yeah, he'd be very possible here.
Okay.
Yeah, very likely.
Yeah, 16-1 shot for the Coral Cup.
I could give him a good chance, yeah. Like him. He works like a very good horse. And I think an extra half a mile here will help him a lot.
And what about Bold Endeavour? We saw him last time at Ascot in the Reynoldstown. Reverting to timber with him?
Possibly. I think he'd won his first 2 chases really well. But I've seen this happen before, Ascot over fences. You know, he won't be the first horse that's been intimidated by them. And, you know, we have schooled him over fences since, and it's in his mind, and that's why we were schooling him back over hurdles with a view. And I know Tony would like to run him in something at Cheltenham. He's perfectly entitled to. He's a talented horse. He needs good ground. Trouble is, he does need to get right up there and be sort of nearly bossing the race. That's going to be very hard to do in something like the Coral. Very, very hard. You know, we actually schooled him there over hurdles this morning with cheek pieces on to just really zip him. And it took him a couple of goes to get back over hurdles. Because, as I say, I think Ascot just sort of frightened him a bit. And it does do their big fences. And he didn't jump or travel as anything like as well as he had done the first 2 times, but they were on, Yeah, Doncaster and where did we go the first time? Leicester. You know, they're much easier fences, and consequently he found that great. But all of a sudden, Ascot just looked a bit big.
Okay. Call me Lord, the Pertemps or the Coral?
Coral, I would say. I don't think he stays 3 miles. We've tried it. I don't think it worked. I'd like to see him in the Coral.
And he's been in very good form this season, hasn't he?
Been very consistent, hasn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
He's in good form. Yeah, very good form. And I think Coral's perfect for him.
Moving on to day 3, we saw Balco Coastal score over fences this morning.
Yeah, I like him a lot, and I think he's in really good form. This is probably the most, of the novice chases, this is the most competitive. But it's the one place we've got to go. I mean, you could go to the Plate. I think I'd stick to novices and probably a smaller field, which I'm thinking it'll be small. I think it's going to be very competitive. I can't believe, rather like myself, that a lot of people are going to want to come in just to take this lot on, because it is a seriously competitive race. I mean, so it should be. It had a small field last year, didn't it? I mean, in a funny way, from his point of view, that's the one thing that'll help him. You know, he hasn't got a lot of experience. I mean, nor have they all, to be honest with you. But I just like him a lot. I think we could be a little bit sharper than he was at Sandown in the City Isles. I mean, he kicked clear going to 2 out, and then the Irish fella got us back on the run-in, and he stayed on well. But I do think there was a little bit of room for improvement on that. If anything, he jumped a little bit left-handed, so I'm going to eke a couple of pounds out for that. I think he could be, he's a lovely horse, but he does himself very, very well.
Let's look at the Pertemps then. So this could be potentially one of your strongest races of the handicaps at the festival. The shortest price of your runners is Walking on Air, who's 8-1 with Unibet. How well treated do you feel he could be off 138?
Well, I suppose, I mean, 1 or 2 people have said that he won at Exeter, his qualifier, not so long ago, 3 Sundays ago, I suppose it was. Some said they thought he got away with £5 quite lightly. I thought that was probably plenty under the circumstances, but I would, wouldn't I? He's in very good form. I mean, just a little cut in the ground would be great. But I think we've got to assume there will be some juice in the ground. He's a very big unit. But he stays well, and he gallops and jumps. He's going to make a lovely chaser next year. But this has always been the plan. I think he has a very good chance.
And Captain Morgs, he's in there off 141. He's 12-1. He seemed to really improve for the step up in trip back at Cheltenham last time.
And cheek pieces.
Yeah.
He's funny. He has got an awful lot of number 2s in front of his name. It's funny. We took him to Kempton for a gallop the other day, and he sat in behind and came and joined them. Went straight as a gun barrel. I think he's thrown 3 races away at Kempton in his life by turning into the straight and diving for just going left the whole way up the straight. Worked him on the all-weather, and he couldn't have been straighter. When he won at Cheltenham with the cheek pieces on for the first time, and that, I mean, the race was peculiar, and I think in a funny way it sort of helped him. They had to bypass the last hurdle. So it was between the second last fence and the last fence. It's a bit like a bending race. Yeah. And that sort of suits his mentality. I think it was much better zigzagging up the run-in like that than it was actually facing him with another hurdle. So if they want to take the last hurdle out with low sun, can it please be in the Pertemps? It might suit him.
But you feel he's one of those sort of horses, yeah, who sort of might like the hurly-burly of those sort of races. We'll just sort of keep him interested and keep him on a bit of a roll.
Well, it's certainly a bit of hurly-burly, yeah, but he's got plenty of pace. He's essentially a 2.5 miler dressing up as a 3, and he won over 3. And it's the sort of race that'll keep him interested, yeah.
Okay. Another lovely bit, probably bigger than Captain Morgs, is Steal a March. Of course, it would be a very memorable success if this horse could win, owned by the King. A 14-1 shot. We haven't seen him, of course, since he won his qualifier at Wincanton around Christmas time. So you deliberately kept him fresh for this?
Yeah, purely because we knew we'd got qualified. You know, we knew we'd got onto a high enough mark to get in. There seemed very little point in going out and getting any more. We rather presumptuously looked at as if that's what would happen. That if you went and won again, instead of 134, you could be 139 or something like that. Well, you know, no need to show the handicapper too much more. He'd seen enough, and I think it's a fair weight. But that was always going to get in, especially this year, as not only you have to be in the first four to qualify, so they've become much more competitive, the qualifiers. But he won that one particularly well, and he stays, and he jumps, and yeah, look, I am very hopeful. It's an optimistic hopeful. Do you know what I mean? Because I think everybody would like to. Yeah. It would be might be quite popular, but you know, we can dream.
Mill Green was placed in the race last year. I think he's a little bit higher in the weights actually on this occasion, 138. But just about got in at Haydock last time, ran well in that qualifier. 25 to 1 with Unibet to win the Pertemps.
He ran very well at Haydock. He looked like the best horse in the race at the second last. Hadn't run for a bit, for no reason that Keith and Rita Brown, they keep their horses, they're all homebreds, they keep them all at home. I don't say he forgotten about, he was just very, very late in coming in, and that's all we had time to get ready for. But so we had to go and get qualified, and he did that comfortably. It was just, you know, he just literally blew up after the second last and ran on nicely. Good timing for this race. That should put him absolutely spot on, to be honest with you. No reason why, as you say, he's been placed in it before. He's very consistent last year. He's placed in all the festivals. I think he's, you know, as you say, we've got a hand here where I don't have to choose which one. I think.
Well, I'm going to ask you, if you had to ride one, which one would it be?
The good thing is, the news is that I'm not going to.
Nicky Henderson sitting on the fence as always. Right, but one horse who's definitely got his chance is Shishkin. He's 8 to 11 with Unibet to win the Ryanair. We all saw what happened in the Ascot Chase last time, a great sort of comeback for him, a mini sort of Sprinter Sacre-esque type. But I mean, you know, how has he been, and what were your feelings after the race, and how confident are you coming into the Ryanair?
Well, it was great, and everybody was very kind, but to compare it with Sprinter's comeback is probably a bit of an exaggeration, because he'd only actually had 2 misses. Now, you go back to the Clarence House last year, that wonderful race with Energinine. He was flat out the whole way round that day. And at the second last, I was watching it with Joe Donnelly, and I mean, we were beaten fair and square. But then the stamina turbo kicked in, and Energinine had got a really good gallop. And as I say, Shishkin was absolutely, that was as fast as he could go to keep up. And he wasn't keeping up. But, you know, Energinine's pace had sort of just started to show on him, and it let Shishkin have a look in the door. And we got there. But it was hard work. And then we had, but that was great. Then we had the drama in the Champion Chase when, I mean, he could have literally pulled him up after one fence. I could see it was wrong. And he came back and he was lame everywhere. I mean, it took us a while to diagnose it, but actually with a full body scan, it showed up that he'd got all these sort of, you could call them star fractures if you like, but they're hot spots. There were 5 of them in all the long bones. You know, he was lame everywhere, and it's sore. So he had quite a long period of box rest, only went out in small paddocks for the summer, came back in, and we just had to take our time, and came back for the Tingle Creek, which actually I was surprised we got ready for that, because we didn't think we would. But again, it looked quite laboured, and again, it looked as if he was just that yard short of pace. They were going a bit too quick for him. He didn't run badly, but he was flat out. So we got back in time for Ascot, which is where we always aimed, following our decision that 2 miles is too short. And that was the obvious race to go for. It was a good competitive test. And yeah, he came through that. It was impressive, I must admit. And you thought, phew, when he jumped the last, we're getting back. And then actually you realised how far clear he'd finished. And he hadn't stopped. So much so that there's a lot of people even still trying to persuade us to go, we should be going up to 3 1/4 now. I cannot believe that's the right one. I'd rather stick to where we are now and then experiment.
Okay, so let's talk about the stayers. You've got Marie's Rock, who's entered in it at the moment. She's 9-2. In your heart of hearts, where would you like to run her?
I talked to Tom Palin, who runs Midland Park, and he's brilliant. And we've discussed it. It's rather like the Epitante decision. JP and I've discussed it nearly every day, and I should think Tom and I have discussed it every day too. And I was talking to him this morning about something else. I said, well, did you read yesterday's article in the Racing Post? And the time I'd finished reading it, he convinced me to run in the stayers. But I'm sure this isn't quite the right way to make the decision.
She looked very good though, didn't she, in the Rail Kill, which is obviously 2.5. Do you feel she could, even if you don't run in the stairs this year, that she will be better over further in due course?
Well, the difference it made going from 2 to 2.5 was enormous. The previous year, admittedly, I don't know whether she was wrong or we were just on the wrong trip altogether over 2 miles. I thought she was speedy, but she was doing nothing the year before, not last year, but the year before that. And then last year, as soon as we upped her in trip, totally different ball game. So what happens if you up her in trip again? She might be even better. I mean, look, she's got a good chance. The mares, if you take it, you've got the winner of 3 Unibet champion hurdles in there. It's a mighty competitive race, the mares.
Let's discuss the mares novice then. You've got 2 in it at the minute, Lucia and a horse with no name. Rare you sort of get horses come back and run the same race, or a novice race in the same race on 2 consecutive years, but a horse with no name is just that. She's a 16-1 shot, and then of course you've got Lucia, who's the favourite at 6-4. So where are we with Lucia at the moment?
She ran on the same Sunday as Walking on Air, so they've been doing much the same thing all the way through. She'll have a school. She always schools in the indoor school, actually, not outside. So she'll do a bit of jumping before that. After she won, we were brave. We started her first time out in a listed hurdle. And then it was rather difficult to find somewhere to go. Then she had a bit of a dirty scope for quite a long time, actually. And it was a matter of where to kick back in again. But Exeter seemed a good place to go. Hopefully she is the one to beat. As I say, she's not likely to be our only, certainly a horse with no name. It's been the plan all along. She was second in it last year. We decided not to run her again in a hurdle race at the back end of last season in order to keep her for this same race this year. And actually went flat racing with her. I won 2 really valuable handicaps over 1 mile and 6. And she was very impressive. We were trying to go to Ascot, but the ground was just too firm, so she had a holiday. She has had one rather disappointing run, but she'd done that before, and then, when we came to this race last year with her, it rained and rained and rained, and we ummed and ahed about taking her out, and sort of, you know what it's like, well, we're here, let's go, come on, which was the right decision, and she finished a fantastic second.
If we just go back to Lucia, how big a temptation would it have been to let her take a chance in the Supreme? Are you pretty much certain that if she goes to Cheltenham, it will be in this race?
I would, yeah. To be fair, I would, and I think Paul Sandy agrees, although he said it's your call. Now, the one person who wanted to run in the Supreme was Nico, and he said she is well up to Supreme. I would be comparing her with Altior's and those sort of boys that, I mean, when Altior went to the Supreme Novice Hurdle, I promise you, you would never say it before, but in the back of my mind, I thought he was unbeatable. and there was a lot of talk that year. I think it was Min's year, wasn't it? That he was the talking horse coming from a friend over there, and he'd have to be a machine to have beaten Altior as he was on that day. He was in tip top, and he was a very, very good horse. He'd won a champion hurdle if he'd stayed over hurdles. Now, can you compare Lucia to that? That's what Nico's sort of trying to say, that, you know, we know what it takes to win a Supreme, but
of course, you get an allowance as well, which would that be?
Well, yeah, putting that into the melting pot as well, yeah. But I still think it's a big ask. I'd keep it simple. If anything is simple.
Okay, it's all far from simple, but okay. In the Kimyor, Emir Sakra.
Yeah, why not? He ran a very good race at Sandown the other day. He likes a bit of soft ground. He'd have a sporting chance.
So the concluding day of the 2023 festival, Nicky, again, not that busy day for you, but you've got a good chance, I think, with First Street in the county hurdle, of course, who was placed in this 12 months ago. It's a 16-1 shot. That, I think, represents good each-way value with Unibet.
Well, he's obviously a lot higher than last year because a lot of things have happened. He was second in this to what is the second favourite for the champion hurdle. He started this year and he won the Jerry Fielden at Newbury. He's done very little wrong. We tried upping him in trip, but I suspect he didn't really get it. Then actually we have played with his wins since his last run too, which I hope will help. But it's difficult. We'll just see how many and what is actually going to, what the field is like in the champion hurdle. It's rather like Epatante. She's sitting on the champion hurdle bench as well. They could both run or neither could run, and they go their separate ways. First Street, I mean, again, he's all the pace and the class to carry him through a county hurdle. He's a very sharp horse. I suspect this is the race he ought to run in that you could pick up a lot of prize money in the champion hurdle, but you still pick up even more satisfactory prize money if you could win the county, which he possibly could do, whereas he possibly would not quite win the champion hurdle. So I suspect this is probably where he ought to go.
So next destination, you've got entered in the Ultima, the Plate, the Kimyor, and also in the county. I mean, so lots of options for him. Could make his debut for you. At this stage, where might he do that in?
Well, he's going very well. He worked beautifully on Saturday. Lack of rain has made us work quite hard with him. It just love to have got a couple more bits of work onto the grass with him, or even a racecourse gallop. I didn't want to take him to Kempton. I don't feel the Polytrack was the best surface for him. We've tried to keep him off it. Now, whether he goes anywhere here or not, I'm not sure. I mean, our original plan was the Grand National. Unfortunately, he's not qualified for it this year because he hasn't run. He's one of these horses that have got caught out by this 6 runs rules. If he's going to run anywhere and the ground's right, probably one of the Ultima or the Kimyor would be the most likely. Right, I don't think he'd run in the county hurdle, I must admit.
And if we just sort of talk over all of the Cheltenham Festival, we've seen over the last sort of certainly 4 or 5 years how dominant the Irish have been. Does that almost sort of make you, I'll say up your game, but just perhaps change the way you may train horses and targets for them because it's so much harder, or do you just carry on doing it as you always have done?
Got to carry on, just do your own thing. Yeah. There's no point worrying. I'm not getting out of bed worrying what Willie's doing in the morning, and I don't expect he's worrying about what I'm doing in the morning. We might meet up somewhere in the evening. We have to. There's plenty of that time for that. No, you can't. You just got to get them there as best you possibly can. And you're watching. Look, everybody's doing their own thing. I'll guarantee everybody's having a sweat about something somewhere. It's never like that. These are choppy waters, and it's these last few. We're down to the last week, but it's still a long way to go. Anything can happen. You know, like we were saying, we schooled them this morning. We've got to go around and feel every leg, make sure there are no nicks and cuts and bangs or bruises tonight. They've got to work tomorrow. Anybody can have a dirty nose in the morning.
Let's just assume they all get there in full health. You must be very pleased with the strength and depth that you've got this year. I mean, you're even obviously discussing where are we going to run that horse, because there are so many options and so many horses and almost not enough races for them all. So you must be pleased with the quality you've got.
Well, that's why I said we want 5 days. Yeah.